Good afternoon. I'm Chris Scher, Member Communications Director of the Society of Broadcast Engineer and the co-host of this month's episode of the SBE WEBxtra, the SBE chapter of the web. This is a monthly SBE meeting usually held on the third Monday of the month. The SBE is the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals with more than 4,500 members, mostly in the U.S., but also around the world. The host of today's SBE WEBxtra is SBE Treasurer and Vice President-elect and Social Networking Committee Chair Kevin Trueblood. Hey, Kevin.
I like that lead in because that's exactly what we're going to be talking about as we get into today's discussion, because we're going to be talking about the SBE around the world and the fact that there are chapters, there are members that are all over the world, as well as educational opportunities available to those who are outside of the United States. And we're going to hear from Jeff Welton, first off, who is forming a Canadian chapter and leading some of the efforts to get some new members there and expand the SBE into Canada, as well as Zhulieta Ibisheva. She is the chair of our international committee, and she's got a lot to talk about as far as our efforts that we've been reaching out to other countries like in Mexico and Brazil and some of the other efforts we've been doing. So we'll talk to them here in just a couple of minutes. But first, Chris, as usual, has a little bit of business to take care of.
Yes, I do. I have your SBE member update for September 18, 2023. The SBE National Meeting takes place next week, September 27 and 28. It's in Columbus, Ohio, during the Midwest Broadcast Multimedia Technology Conference. Midwest Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Conference. You can get all the details on the conference and the SBE activities at the SBE website. But the finale of the national meeting is the SBE Awards Dinner, which will be held at the Hyatt Regency Columbus on September 28. To attend, you must purchase a dinner ticket before September 19. If you're watching live, that's tomorrow. Go to sbe.org/national-meeting and follow the link for the awards dinner tickets, and we hope we'll see you in Columbus. In June, a new four-part series of webinars began called Basic RF for IT. The course is designed for newer engineers who may come from an IT or non-technical background and need some training on the theory and components involved in generating radio frequency signals, as well as the principles involved with respect to maintaining and optimizing operation. Some guy named Jeff Welton of Nautel and Gary Cavell of Cavell Mertz and Associates are the instructors. Modules 1, 2, and 3 are now available on demand. Module 4 streams live on September 21. Another new series began in August, Back to Basics, Network Design and Configuration. Series provides an understanding of the fundamentals required in the design of, implementation, and support of an IP network in a broadcast and real-time environment. Part 1 focused on network architecture and design with an emphasis on ensuring performance and security, and it's available on demand. Part 2 will continue with a focus on configuration considerations with an emphasis on IP addressing and subnetting concepts for efficient use of IPv4 addresses, but IPv6 basics will also be included. This next webinar streams live on October 19. With the Basic RF for IT series coming to a close, the natural follow-up is Applied RF Basics. This will be another four-part series, and once again, Jeff Welton and Gary Cavell will return to lead the series. Module 1, Medium Wave AM Radio Systems, will stream live on October 21, and Module 2, VHF FM Radio Systems, will stream live on November 16. You can always access the entire library of webinars by SBE presentations on demand. For more information on these and all of them, go to sbe.org/webinars. The SBE Leadership Development course will be held in Washington, D.C., October 4 through 6 at the headquarters of Radio Free Asia. In fact, we just closed registration for that a little bit earlier this morning. But if you'd still like to attend, call the national office, and we will do what we can to see if we can get you in the course. If you want some more information on the Leadership Development course, go to sbe.org/LDC. On the certification side, the next chapter exam window is in November. The application date for those exams is now closed. After that, the next local chapter exam window is in February of next year. The application deadline to take an exam then is January 3rd, 2024. Seems a long way off, but don't put it off. Do it now. If you don't want to wait, or if a local chapter exam is just not convenient for you, we can arrange private proctoring. For more information on SBE certification, go online, of course, sbe.org/certification. An FCC regulatory item, the FCC and FEMA will originate a national EAS test on October 4th. It's at 2:18 p.m. Eastern Time. FEMA will send the test message via wireless emergency alert. And at 2:20 p.m., FEMA will send, that's Eastern Time, FEMA will send the EAS test via iPause with the NPT code. Stations are required to send test results with the EAS test reporting system. Go to the news and headlines section of the SBE website for more information. And that is your SBE member update for September 18, 2023. Kevin.
So last week, Jeff Welton had invited me to be the presenter of the third meeting of the new, soon to be Canadian chapter of the Society of Broadcast Engineers. And it kind of got me to thinking, because as the SBE secretary for a couple of years, I always said the line, and I pulled this from a recent script. The Society has 115 chapters with 113 in the United States, 2 in Hong Kong. Members are located in every U.S. state, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, and in 25 other countries. So that got me to thinking about, well, what are our efforts and what is out there and what is the SBA doing in other countries? And that's who we're going to be talking to today. So Chris Shearer has got a lot to say about that because he's been involved with a lot of these programs over the last couple of decades. We've also got Jeff Welton, who is leading those efforts in the Canadian chapter, as well as Zhulieta Ibisheva. She is our chair of the International Committee and has been part of that work. So thank you to everybody for joining us today. So, Chris, I want to start with you first, and I know there's no feline chapter for the SBE, even though I know your cat really wants there to be. But let's kind of get a backstory of how I guess involved have we been in other countries with over the years with the SBE?
I off the top of my head, I don't remember when they first began, but we've had an international committee for quite some time now. Chuck Kelly was chair of that committee for many, many years when he was active with his broadcast manufacturer employment because he traveled all over the world. So he was a great ambassador for the SBE at the time. With his help and some others, we currently have affiliations with, I think it's 10 other groups around the world. Mitra in Mexico, BES in India, CCBE and WABE in Canada, the SBE-TP in Philippines, SET in Brazil, AND-EBU in Uruguay, the BES-PAK in Pakistan, the COBITA in Korea, and not to leave anybody out, SACIA in Southern Africa. So
I'm impressed that you were able to list off all those acronyms as quickly as you could.
Just in my head, of course. I'm not using any kind of a prompter whatsoever.
Sure.
So that's one mark of our efforts. More recently, and actually we're up to 116 chapters. The latest SBE chapter to be authorized is Chapter 148. It's technically called the Eastern European chapter, led by members in the Republic of Georgia, although they do work with engineers in neighboring countries, Armenia, Azerbaijan, I believe Moldova, and there might be another country that I've heard mentioned at times. But their group is certainly looking to branch out and work across that region and encourage more member participation and certainly take advantage of all the educational opportunities the SBE has to offer. In fact, they do have a graphic. I put together a map, Suncast, if you happen to have that image handy. It shows where our members are around the world, and there it is. So the big blue blob is the United States, of course, but all those countries that are in gold. And if the borders aren't right, please don't get mad at me. I, kind of did what I could with my best fair use of a map I found online. So some of the borders may be a little inconsistent, but in general, that gives you an idea as to where our members are located all around the world. So every continent is represented except one, the obvious one. Penguins aren't eligible, I guess. So that gives you an idea. I had mentioned the Eastern European chapter. They currently have, I believe, about 12 members, most of them based in Tbilisi, but they are looking to expand and gather more members as well. There is just more effort going on working with David Ropakidze and that group to grow their chapter, and I think maybe you'll have something to share on that in a little bit as well, Kevin.
Yeah, indeed. And I'm curious. So, how does that actually work if they don't have like a formal chapter? Because you showed that we have members in India and in countries in Africa as well. How does that work if somebody is signed up from there? Are they just part of a virtual chapter, or where do they kind of default to?
Right. Well, we currently have a situation where if a member does not have a chapter, and I just realized I forgot to mute my phone, so forgive me while I quickly do that. I was distracted. Um, there's an internal naming convention we use to say that you're not affiliated directly with a chapter. So you certainly get all the communications. You just don't have a direct one-on-one chapter to work with. And one of the ways we try to reach out to those members is, for instance, this way with the SBE WEBxtra. That's why we call it the chapter of the web. But certainly all the educational programs, the member benefits, et cetera, they're all available to members. They just don't have the luxury of a local chapter presence that we can offer to them. In the case of certification, certification exams are typically administered through a local chapter. So in that case, private proctoring typically comes into play. And in that case, a trusted individual, as we'll say, could be, if it's a military, a commanding officer. We've used librarians, teachers, professors at a college or a school, um, a supervisor where you work, perhaps, somebody in HR, perhaps. But we have ways, a clergyman as well, also. We've worked with a lot of different situations to administer certifications exams for those individual members who do not have a local chapter nearby. So we do have ways to serve the needs of those members, even though there may not be a local chapter. But we certainly encourage them to get together and try to form a chapter if they can.
Is that now? I'm going to turn that to Zhulieta. Is that kind of your experience too when you're seeing folks reach out from these kind of countries? There, are they like belonging to schools, or are they belonging to organizations that are kind of wanting the training membership? Like, how does that relationship begin?
Surprisingly, most people who reach out, they're actually working professionals already. I have not heard from that many students, but I have had people from the Middle East, which is a new territory for us, and I think that we should explore it going forward as much as we possibly can. But I believe the Middle East is just growing so rapidly, and they always want to be um, the latest and greatest on technology. So I have had a few broadcast engineers, mainly television actually, that have reached out and have expressed some interest in becoming members, but not enough people to get a chapter together right off the bat. But I think with a little bit of work, we can definitely get there. And looking at the map, Europe as a whole is kind of unexplored at this point, and I think that that's a great geographic area for us. And there is a great need as well. I know the standards may be slightly different, but the educational content that the SBE has is absolutely relevant to everyone. And I am setting up a meeting for next summer in Italy. A friend of mine works at Radio Vatican and also trying to get somebody from Rai Uno on board to see if we can maybe form an Italian chapter. So I'm very excited about that opportunity, and we'll see how it goes. And then from there, we could potentially expand to other countries as well.
Well, as we get into actually starting a new chapter, Jeff Welton is helping lead some of those efforts with a Canadian chapter, which, given as geographically diverse as Canada is, it's interesting to have one chapter for all of Canada. But Jeff, I wanted to kind of get your mindset, because I was kind of leading into this is, there's this desire that we have professionals, there are people doing the same jobs for broadcast radio, television, and for digital in other countries, but they may not have a formal group that's there, or they're interested in the SBE. So, how did you end up kind of picking up that ball and running with getting a Canadian chapter started? Like, where did that interest begin?
And I'm going to caveat that right off the bat. It's not fair to say I started it by any stretch. Somebody had mentioned, SBE has a national chapter liaison, and for us this year, at this time, it's Mark Heller out of Wisconsin, and Mark was the one that started this. So credit's where it's due. I mean, shortly after NAB, somebody had mentioned it should be done, and he started rolling with it. Put a lot of work into it, mailings, phone calls, etc. And I kind of stumbled in a little later. Jim Ragsdale had mentioned in an email that it something we should look at, and I think I was blind copied on an email, so I don't know who all it got addressed to, but I sort of something will get my attention, and I'm like a cat with a laser pointer, and I went off chasing it, and that's where we ended up. I got an email list and reached out, and so one of the things we're doing, because we are talking close to 3,500, 4,000 miles from end to end, we're doing a lot. We're focusing on a virtual chapter. So primarily we meet via Zoom. There are, as you mentioned, there are relationships with WABI and CCBE already. So, like for example, Kathy Oros, our education chair, is putting together a session for the WABI convention in November. So there are a lot of opportunities for the Canadian members to go out and meet each other regionally, and having sort of a virtual, I guess, living room where we can all come together is sort of the goal at the moment.
You know, Jeff,
Well,
actually, I'm
how,
going to interrupt. You said you meet virtually, but I managed to get a photo of a recent meeting of some of the Canadian engineers. Suncast, do you have that photo handy for me? There it is.
I
Oh,
knew he'd
wait
had
a
to come
minute.
up with something like that at some
Maybe
point.
that's the wrong photo. Sorry. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Now, in fairness, though, Bob and Doug were with a comedy group called Second City Television, so they are broadcasters. They would almost qualify in that regard.
There you go.
that actually looks like
So
a chapter meeting I'd love to go to anyway.
I know.
and say you've got the background for that sort of thing, Kevin. So you were going to say something else before Chris jumped in with that photo.
No, I was going to ask you, how would so you mentioned a virtual chapter, and this can go to you or for Chris or Zhulieta, whoever can answer it. But I guess, how would that work? How does the concept of a virtual chapter work? Because I know there's a lot of chapters that do virtual meetings. Is that just kind of the exclusive way that you're going to run the chapter, is just to do via Zoom, or how does that work?
So we're looking at, and I mean, it depends. Like one of the things Mark discovered with his research is that I think he told me 34%, but a significant number, almost a third of our members in Canada are in the Calgary area, Alberta. So there's nothing to stop them from getting together and just live streaming a virtual meeting, sort of, instead of hosting it, having it, or they could host something and we just stream it to everybody. So, I mean, one of the expenses we're going to have as a primarily virtual chapter will be a chapter Zoom account, and then we'll just give access to all the officials. So, like somehow I know how I got elected chair. It's because I was the fool that opened his mouth first. But when somebody, I think I said, "Hey, who should chair this thing?" And it's like tick, tick, tick. Well, I guess I could do it, and everybody's, "Oh, yay!" Anyway, so point being, when I'm on the road or doing whatever I do that pays the bills, then then our vice chair Jordan out of Newfoundland will be able to cover it. And if he's not available, we've got secretary and treasurer. Let's see, John and Ken, I think, are both out of Ontario. So the distance in that regard is less of a consideration. The downside is that we don't get as much face time together. So it is going to be important whenever the opportunity comes up to try and get that, take advantage of that, like with Wabi or CCBE, or if anybody happens to be in anybody else's area.
And this could work, Chris. This one's for you, Chris. That kind of format could work for any chapter, really. That's not exclusive to a Canadian chapter. If they're only able to meet virtually, whatever works best for them, right?
Oh, absolutely. I was just thinking about the Kansas chapter, chapter 3. Kansas City has a chapter, and that kind of covers the metro and a little bit out, Lawrence and, 20, 40, 50 miles south. But the rest of the state has a chapter. Now, granted, they're mostly based between Topeka and Wichita, but it's still a pretty good sized area when you get out to Dodge City and western Kansas. But yeah, exactly what Jeff is doing in Canada can easily be applied in other areas. And some chapters that aren't necessarily covering a wide area. I'm going to pick out New York chapter. 15 in this case, has done all of their meetings hybrid. They may be live and in person, but they're putting them all up on Zoom, and they've been inviting other people to join as well. So it definitely can be applied across the board.
That's kind of one of the things that got me thinking about doing it as a virtual chapter. I mean, it's pretty obvious from my background what I do for a living. And when I took over sales in 2007, one of the first things I did was reach out to all the chapters in my territory in an email and said, hey, if you get caught short on a presenter, have a cancellation, or somebody just can't make it, give me a shout. I can set up we were using Citrix GoToMeeting, but whatever format, I can set up a virtual presentation with about an hour's notice. So, I mean, it was one of those situations where if they had a cancellation, I've had several chapters reach out and say, "Hey, can you pinch hit for us?" And at that point, I started realizing that you don't necessarily need to be in the room. I mean, there's nothing that will ever beat the ability to shake somebody's hand and look them in the eye, so to speak. But in a pinch, you can make do pretty well.
Well, Jeff, since you're on
If
the
I may
screen
just
still,
share.
what's been? Oh, go ahead, Zhulieta.
Oh, I apologize. I just wanted to share about the Hawaii chapter because we are a really small geographic area, and our chapter was silent for about 23 years. We just revived it this summer, and we've been doing the hybrid mode between Zoom and in person. So for one of the meetings, most people joined over Zoom because it was just more meet and greet. And then we had a presenter, Jeff LaRoche, who is a satellite specialist, and he needed a satellite signal. So I was able to do Zoom from my phone. The feedback was actually great because I was able to take the phone downstairs into the studio. So he was showing the Pro Max spectrum analyzer. So I was able to get in really close with my camera. It was more interactive than just having a computer screen. So getting close, people could see exactly what he was doing. And the feedback was great. We did have maybe 6 or 7 people showed up in person, but we also had another 5 or 6 on the Zoom call. So it worked out. It worked out absolutely great. So I think going forward, we will do in person with the option for Zoom for every meeting, because a lot of people, like if they're on the road or at the transmitter site, they cannot attend. They can always just call in.
And you
Sure.
have the
And in that
interesting
case, it's not like you can
situation.
just drive over too.
That's exactly what I was going to
Yes.
say. You've got a series of small islands, but you're separated by something that kind of gets in the way.
Yes. Well, Doug
Well,
Long
and
is part of our chapter. He is on Big Island, but he also flies almost every week to the mainland because he's NBC and Universal. So he would just sometimes call in from an airport and be part of the meeting, which is absolutely great. I love having him on board. So it's wonderful that we can incorporate everybody who wants to listen. And on that note, I have been actually reaching out to French Polynesia, and I have some friends in Tahiti. The language barrier is a little bit tricky there, but if we can at least show them what we do and maybe they can form their own chapter later on, I think that's a great start, because right here in Polynesia, I think the need is dire. Like from everyone I hear, Samoa, Fiji, they really, really need help with their broadcast engineering. So I think this would be a great opportunity for them.
that's interesting you brought that up. And we were talking about this before we got on the air, but that's one of the challenges you were saying with getting SBE material over to some of these other countries is there's some things that are lost in translation. How are folks, how are our chapters dealing with the translation issue? Because this is for videos, for webinars, for books and things like that. How are they handling that?
I think what we've been discussing is potentially adding subtitles, because that would be the most economical and easiest way to get multiple languages. Maybe just pick 2 or 3 languages to begin with and see how well it carries across. But also, with AI being so predominant, that might be a good opportunity for us to explore, I would say, more cost-effective ways to add subtitles and translations. So we'll see how that pans out, but it's definitely something we're looking into to see how we can get our educational content to more people across the world.
And Jeff, how has the reception been so far with your efforts to start the Canadian chapter? I know I was in meeting number 3, but it sounds like you're actually going to actually get the official designation.
Uh, Fingers crossed. I mean, and again, like I say, Mark has done a massive amount of work for it. I know he's got several signatures on his mailings. I've got some. Between the two of us, we've got the signatures required. We've had enough meetings. We've got the. I mean, I think we have everything in place, but this is my first time doing this. So if I screwed something up, that's totally on me, and we'll figure it out and fix it. We had 12 people at the meeting where we decided that we were going to have a chapter. The next meeting where we sort of found the victims, I guess, for lack of a better word, and that's probably my fault. Maybe I shouldn't send out the agenda saying we'll be electing officers this meeting. But that one we were right at 10 or 11, I think. And then our last meeting, the one you were at where we actually had content, we were up to 23. Counting presenters, we were 25 or 26. I'd have to look at the team's record to be certain, but yeah, it's shown a lot of interest and it seems to be growing. So as we pull together on it, I like to see that keep going.
Yeah, I think the experience you had is pretty similar to every chapter in that the first two volunteers is the one that gets volunteered or whatever. Or if you're just new, it's like, hey, new person, you get to have all the responsibilities, and that's
Well, and,
not.
and so looking at it going forward, we'll start nominating the people that don't show up, and you'll come to the next meeting and discover you now have a position. But it's been a really fun experience like that. The one thing that, and again, 3 meetings is not a lot to base it on, but just looking at the attendance records, having a program is crucial. And I mean, when you get right down to it, one of the biggest reasons people join SBE is for the educational content. So that makes sense when I look at it from that perspective. So the advantage I've got with my day job and our program chair is, let's see, out of Calgary, I am. This is where Andrew Shaw. Thank you. It took me a little while to catch on, but memory is going as I get older. This is why we have to have a full slate of officers for when I finally lose it. But so Andrew has got a few ideas that I think will be really interesting for programs, and we've got a few folks that are volunteering Rolodexes and helping out. So yeah, just keeping the content, the program, the educational value there is going to be huge.
Now, one thing we kind of touched on, both Zhulieta and Jeff, and I want to send this over to you, Chris, because you've dealt with this on and off over the years. What is just the Cliff Notes version of if somebody actually wanted to start a chapter or restart a chapter? What's the process that's involved in doing that?
I was thinking you were going to toss that to me, and I was quickly trying to verify what is in my head. So if I get something a little wrong, I hope I don't make too big of a mistake here.
I'm
As I
glad we think
recall,
alike on this one.
as I recall, to form a chapter, it's a minimum of 10 SPE members. We ask you to have 3 meetings under your belt. We do ask a chapter to have some way to handle funds because chapters will get money from national. So a bank account's required. And then the chapter will have to draw up its own set of bylaws. We have some sample bylaws that can be used, kind of fill in the blank type thing. Once those all happen, it's submitted to the national office. The board of directors will vote on it and, in most cases, authorize it. There are times where some of those requirements may not be fully met in some ways, and there have been waivers granted. But that's sort of the basic guideline of what we want to see when we're asking members to form a new chapter in a given area.
And how do we handle these partnerships for these organizations? Like we've got the ones that are coming to us from Georgia. We've got the ones in Mexico. How have we handled those that may or may not be formally SBE chapters or just want to kind of form an alliance with us? Like, how does that process work? And that's for either you, Zhulieta, or Chris.
If you have something to put in there, Zhulieta, take it. If not, I'll add what I can add.
I'm not sure on the official paperwork front how that would work, but usually if somebody expresses interest, I will direct them to Jim or Chris for more information.
And
I have
U.S.
been heavily
specifically.
recruiting members, so that's what I would do. I would just introduce them straight up. So I just got 2 new members as of last week. So.
All right.
These were international members.
No, these are actually in the U.S., but they're not broadcast engineers. They're satellite specialists. But I was like, hey, you belong in our organization. So they're like, yeah, okay, let's join. So
Allied
All
to the
right.
industry.
That's what we like to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, you had mentioned the Eastern European chapter. Of course, they're SBE members, so that's like any other SBE member in any other chapter. That as far as how we work with them and support them and what they get from the SBE. In the case of just picking one out of the hat, Amitra in Mexico, that's an agreement that we've had in place for oh my gosh, a long time. And I don't remember all the exact phrasings of the partnership, if you will. I know a lot of times it'll be just sharing of ideas, perhaps helping each other if there's an issue. And of course, since we share a border, if there are any kind of a technical issue that would affect both countries, we may talk and see if there's some common ground that whether it's a frequency band or allocated bandwidth or encoding format, whatever the case might be. As we're filing, say, with the FCC and they're filing with their equivalent down there, we may work together. So it kind of depends on the individual agreement as to exactly what's entailed. It may be as little as we recognize the other group exists, and hey, if there's anything we can do to help, let us know, and vice versa.
And on that note, Jim and I had a little discussion to perhaps attend their annual meeting next summer. I believe they hold it in August, every August. So we talked about potentially attending and see if we can expand that partnership somehow. But also in terms of membership and international members in particular, we had a discussion about cost, how for some countries it could be an exorbitant amount of money, which is not that much in the United States, but there is like a way to get creative with member dues coverage. What I did in Hawaii, I'm not sure if other states have done that too, but I partnered up with the Hawaii Association of Broadcasters, and they actually agreed to pay the member dues for any new member and existing member who would like to join or renew their membership. So they have covered probably close to 10 members right now, and they just get an invoice and they pay for that because they want to help the broadcasters.
There are some other state associations. Sorry, I'm stepping on you. I don't mean to. I'll let you finish.
No, that's great. And
okay.
I think internationally there might be an opportunity to do something like that and have the respective organizations perhaps cover the dues to get more people involved.
Absolutely. And I was going to add, you did that in Hawaii. We do have some similar arrangements with a few other state associations to cover whether it's membership dues or some other fees associated with some educational opportunities. So the opportunity has certainly been shown to work within the United States. So by all means, let's see if we can apply that to situations and environments outside the U.S.
Absolutely.
So Zhulieta, you had mentioned the translation, some of the language barriers that we have, but have there been any other challenges or interesting things that you've run into as far as working with other international groups and chapters?
I mean, I think after language, the second biggest challenge is time zones, right? It's how do you get people in different time zones to attend the same meeting? That's quite challenging. That's why I was thinking maybe inviting some engineers from Samoa, Saipan, perhaps, or Tahiti. And they're actually, I think if it's Tuesday here, it's already Wednesday morning over there. So it could be arranged. It's just a little bit tricky to figure out everybody's time zone and make sure that everyone can attend.
Well, even among us, from east to west here, we've got a 6-hour time zone difference.
Yes.
So, we're living it ourselves right now, but we managed to make it work. So,
yeah, poor Jason Ornelas. I say poor Jason Ornelas, who's our secretary right now. Every time we've ever done a virtual meeting on the East Coast, he's having to wake up at 5 a.m. over on California. And I'm sure, Zhulieta, you're used to that being even further back in Hawaii.
Like 2 or 3 a.m.
Yeah, that'd be 2 o'clock in the morning for her. Yeah.
But even on a smaller scale, I mean, just trying to work out a monthly meeting time, because I mean, for us, we cover 4.5 time zones once you factor in Newfoundland and if you're doing lunchtime, so lunchtime central is kind of what we have picked so far, but the other option is you alternate meetings every month. So
Mhm.
lunchtime this month, evening next month, et cetera, and so on to try to accommodate as many people as you can. So yeah,
Sure.
like Zhulieta says, you really have to be aware of your different members and where they're from and what you can do to accommodate everybody.
Mhm.
Gotcha. So, is there any other thoughts that anybody had on as far as our international work that we've done? I know Chris, you've been pretty involved in this, and again, Zualita. Any final thoughts?
I would just say that boots on the ground is usually the best way to get people involved, because sending out emails, sometimes it just, I don't want to say this, but it just falls on deaf ears. Versus if you are there and you get to talk to people and actually explain to them what this entails, it just, the impact is way more profound, and the call to action is more visible, I feel. That's why when Jim and I talked about potentially attending a Mitra's meeting in Mexico, you don't know what could come of it, because it could be something great. And you attending a meeting in Georgia next month, that's so exciting. I actually think that chapter could grow exponentially.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. We're firming that up, but long story short, Jim Ragsdale and I are looking to go over to Georgia at the end of October to meet the chapter over there. So we'll certainly have a lot of videos and photos and stories to share about that trip. But with all of that, Jeff, any thoughts about moving your chapter forward for Canada? What's the future looking like for you?
So for us, I mean, I'll be in Columbus next week and hopefully submitting again in conjunction with Mark a completed application to get it certified as a chapter. At that point, carrying on with programs and making sure that we're listening to what the members want and finding something that's of interest and value to everybody.
All right. Chris, any final advice for folks that are looking to maybe start up a chapter or looking to use the SBE as a resource for, I mean, wherever they are? That could be in the States or internationally as well.
Sure. Well, as Julieta said, the boots on the ground, I think, is a good thing to keep in mind. Every project needs a champion to lead it. Email is a great way to communicate, but as she said, it can fall on deaf ears. It's easy to ignore. You look at it, you think, I'll look at it later. And then 500 more messages show up and it's sitting down at the bottom of the list. And you don't even think about it. We've got plenty of resources. We have a chapter liaison committee, and that's one of their goals. Each board member and officer is assigned a chapter or several chapters, usually their own and a handful of others. Sometimes it's not, it's based on the geographic location of our board members. It's doesn't always make the most sense if you look at a map. But we certainly try. I mean, Kevin, you're in Florida, and I think all of your assigned chapters are in the Florida, at least the southeastern side of the U.S. Jason is pretty much, West Coast and some of the markets that he serves, et cetera. But nonetheless, I mean, that's one resource we have. So if somebody wants to try to form a chapter somewhere, just contact the national office. We'll do what we can. We can put together a list of other members in the immediate geographic area, try to help set up some communication channels and get the ball rolling. And we'd love to get more chapters. So,
I'll butt in a little bit
And
there
if I
too.
may just
If
add,
you, sorry,
oh, I
Jeff, go ahead.
apologize.
if
If I could just add that the SBE is not trying to work against people trying to form chapters. Me personally, I've experienced the helpfulness of the organization when I tried to revive the Hawaii chapter. I could not get enough people to attend the meeting. Like, I had maybe 6 people versus the required 10. We had the members, but not the attendees.
Mhm.
The SBE will work with anyone to try and accommodate your specific situation and make it happen for you. So I'm truly um, so happy that we made Hawaii chapter live again, because for 23 years nobody wanted to pick up the baton and start having meetings again and start getting people together. So the SBE was instrumental and so helpful in making it happen. So it's not, there aren't extra obstacles to make it not happen. It's quite the opposite. So if anybody has any interest, like just call the national office. They're wonderful.
Jeff, go
Indeed.
ahead.
I was going to say one of the other excellent resources, and by the way, pat on the back and kudos for the new website, because I love this thing. But the chapter administration forms, including the operations manual and the application form, are on the website, and that's just a huge resource for being able to figure out what you need to do to get things rolling.
Indeed.
Good
And
point.
just so everybody knows, we're not all this rude to each other. There is a delay between all of us. So imagine every time you're on Zoom, this is how that works. So we're all friends off camera. So well, thank you all for joining us today. This is fascinating to know that we are involved in so much around the world, and continuing to grow. And as Chris mentioned, as Zhulieta mentioned, and even Jeff, that we are happy to expand those resources and happy to work with everybody who is interested in working with us. So just want to say thanks for joining us, and thanks to Zhulieta and Jeff for joining us as guests, and as well as Chris. You are definitely part of this too. You're not normally a guest, so it's always it puts me a little bit off. So thanks for watching the WEBxtra, and we'll turn things over to Chris to close things out for us.
Okay, well, I'll try not to be so off-putting next time. Well, this has been the SBE WEBxtra, the SBE chapter of the web. We present it monthly. We hope you'll join us each time. We'll post the replay on our YouTube channel. It should be up there by tomorrow at the latest. If you hold SBE certification, viewing the SBE WEBxtra qualifies you for 1/2 point in Category G, that's attendance. It's just like attending a local chapter meeting. If you have an idea for a topic or a guest for the SBE WEBxtra, send it to me. Send it to webextra@sbe.org. That'll come straight to me. That does it for this installment of the SBE WEBxtra from the Society of Broadcast Engineers, the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals. Thanks again to our guests, Zhulieta Ibisheva and Jeff Welton. And on behalf of Kevin Trueblood, we will see you next month.